welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And here we are, straight from the cinema with our spoiler-free reactions to Weapons.
Yeah, this one, I was quite excited for this one, you know. The trailer looked good, Barbarian was banging, and I heard a lot of positive buzz about it, so yeah, I was hyped.
Yeah, it was. I was going to say, I was as well. I was trying to temper my expectations of what this film was going to be, because you see like a shit ton of positive reviews for a film that you're excited about, and then you just think, it gets to that point when it's like, can something live up to your expectations? And yeah, I think we've both come away fairly happy, I think, with the end result. We'll build more on, I guess, our final reactions later, but obviously this is Zach Creggers Weapons, and I was just looking at the little like kind of roundup of the film, and I was thinking about the marketing for this film, because it is labelled as a black comedy horror mystery film is what it's literally listed as. That's quite a mouthful. A American black comedy horror mystery film. But I do think that weirdly all of those titles do play, because this one is hard to box down to one area.
Yes,
we've had this thriller horror debate in the past where it's kind of like, well, it's the same thing, but there are differences, but it's the same. I think one of the most important I would point out to anyone listening though, like again, spoiler free, we're not going to ruin anything for it. You should go in as blind as you can.
Yes.
Don't ruin it. Expect it's a journey. It's a slow burn in many ways, I would say. It's not like a fast-paced horror where you're going to get the information in the first 30 minutes and you're like, now we're riding it now. This is a 2-hour plus film which is going to take you for a bit of a journey of characters.
Yeah. And going in blind is the best way of doing it. I went to see Barbarian, and me and my wife went in completely blind. If you listen to the show, which this is my chance to do the cheap plug, make sure you hit that subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. Always scroll back, make sure you've hit that button. I listen to podcasts and don't subscribe. I'm getting better at doing it. But I went in absolutely blind for Barbarian, didn't have a clue what to expect, walked away, almost shitting myself because it was an incredible film. It played with your expectations. It was horrifying at moments. It was incredibly gory, the right level of gore for me. So I went into this film thinking, like, going relatively blind. I saw the trailer for it, but I don't think it particularly gave too much away. It was really well done of just leaving you enough with that mystery of like what's going on, and you effectively get from the trailer what they tell you in the opening. What was going through my mind is like, not exactly, but I can imagine it as a Star Wars opening crawl where it basically tells you the layout of what the story, the inciting
a child telling a story. Bit fairy tale, like.
Bit fairy tale-ish. It's I would kind of, looking at those things that you said, kind of like an American black comedy, horror, thriller. It does have all of those. However, what I didn't find, I know you may differ, but I didn't find that it had any kind of tonal inconsistencies. I found that it was pretty solid throughout it. When there was the dark comedy, it was kind of pretty clear what was supposed to be kind of darkly comic. There were moments that were really quite unsettling, and there were moments of horror. I thought it was quite spot on for it.
I don't like it. Wasn't totally inconsistent in like a majorly negative way. It wasn't something that caused me any kind of major thing. I was just like, when I was pointing out those things like the black comedy, I more wanted to point out to people that, just like Barbarian actually had a weirdly at times tongue-in-cheek kind of way of approaching certain things, including, and again, I'm not spoiling that one either. If you haven't seen it, go in blind and go see that. But definitely what happens towards the end of the film, I think you've got to be in a kind of willing to like let your mind take that as kind of, they're making this horrific, but also it's kind of funny in a weird way, in that black comedy way. This has got the same kind of thing. My only thing with the marketing is the fact that I think this has been sold very, very thriller, little bit horror, none of that comedy part. And there were people laughing in our screening, and there were times when they laughed when I think it was meant to be
a bit more straight.
It was meant to be more like that's meant to be creepy, and they were laughing at it.
Okay, interesting.
So there were a lot. I heard quite a fair amount of few laughter at some scenes, especially of a specific character in this film who pops up, and they were laughing. And I kind of understood why they were laughing because it looks ridiculous. But I'm not saying that that is necessarily a negative on the film because it all makes sense in the run of it.
Yeah.
But there are some bits I think you've got to get through in this film that do at times feel a little bit like, oh, why is that person walking in such a weird fucking way? Like, people were laughing at that in the cinema. I was like, I'm not sure they're meant to be laughing at the way this person is walking towards a car. And again, this is complete, I'm not trying to spoil anything, but there was a character in one scene that comes out of a house towards a car, walking a certain way, and there were people laughing in the audience. And I was like, I can understand why you're laughing, because it does look a bit silly. Like, and it does. And when other characters, like I mentioned a second ago, pop up, it looks a bit silly. It's a little bit of a one thing that I think is the only tonal thing that takes adjusting to, and I don't think that every audience will love it in that way.
Probably
because
not.
They're expecting almost a Josh Brolin thriller.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
you
have Josh Brolin, and in this trailer he comes across as this very serious kind of thing with the teacher and stuff like that, and you have a couple of like horror things, but the trailers I've seen for it have all played this very much as this kind of mystery thriller with horror elements, which is mainly pretty true.
Yeah.
But there is a little bit of that Zach Creggers from his comedy background, of that tongue-in-cheek comedy. And towards the end of the film, there's several scenes that people were laughing out loud. But that was meant to be on purpose. Yeah. And it was fucking funny.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the one kind of thing that I got particularly at the start, going on that kind of thriller vibe, is I was thinking very much like, this is a bit like Prisoners, you know, except instead of Mr. Hugh Jackman, we've got Mr. Josh Brolin.
Yeah.
One thing that I did that really kind of caught me off guard, and we won't kind of go into it too much because I think it was quite a nice surprise, but it's how the story was told.
Yeah.
It's kind of, you know, now how the narrative kind of changes often. I didn't expect it. I thought it was going to be a lot more of a straight-laced kind of film, but instead, you know, it does
different perspectives,
but it was done really well.
It does. Yeah. It does really slowly kind of, you know, you get like a good chunk of each actor, and then they become, I guess, side characters because you get a good chunk of someone else kind of thing. Yeah. And the way it kind of comes together, and that's why I said it's like a journey.
Yeah,
you got to go with it, because early on in the film you might be like, oh fuck, who's this cat? Are we going to follow this character? You know, is this who we're because like some characters, and this is a very Zach Creggers going back to Barbarian, you know, that he's very willing to make characters be ugly.
Oh yeah,
as people, and you know, these characters here are exactly the same. They're very flawed people. They're very, you know, characters. I think when you first meet them, Julia Garner's character, for instance, when you first meet, I can't remember what her actual name is. I'm blanking. Anyway, Julia Garner, the actress, who she plays in this film, the teacher that she plays, the Silver Surfer. She plays a character who I think on first approach, and when you see it, you think, oh, this is a poor character, quite, quite like you should feel sorry for her. The more you get to know her, the less that you maybe enjoy her, I think, in many ways. But it's not necessarily a negative on the film, because, again, this is the stuff that makes people willingness to not like a character. And this isn't just her character, by the way. But willingness to show the flaws in characters is something that Barbarian did really well.
Yes.
Mr. Justin Long, for instance, having those layers, you know, you are like Shrek and that onion.
and it kind of almost reminded me of a book in that way. You know, there were times where I was watching it and I was like, I could imagine this being adapted, like a really good adaptation of a book. The way in which the perspectives do shift, the way in which the characters are a lot more kind of, they're not completely fleshed out, but the way in which they do have a few more layers. And you're right. Sometimes you'll see people being a bit ugly, the ugly side of somebody, and it's not to be done in a way to make you hate the character, and intentionally. It's more like that's like a person, and when you've done a lot of like head hopping, and you see stories through different perspectives, you're kind of like, that makes sense. Like there was something, and I'm sure you picked up on this, and we'll talk about it in our spoiler, in our spoiler-filled one. But I was like, that makes sense for the characters with their motivations to do this. Whereas I feel like a film that was maybe a bit more Hollywood would have made a decision, would have made the more obvious choice.
Yeah. I had that with multiple characters in certain scenes as well, where I was like, I think I know exactly where this is going to go now, and it didn't. It did divert from what the expectation was, and I'm not saying that necessarily in some big twist kind of way. Just saying that the characters made different choices than you maybe would be your first idea of what they're going to make and why people make certain choices. Like he's definitely got deeper kind of thought into these characters that he kind of seems to understand their motivations and their reasons. And it's what makes it, it's what makes, on top of the beautiful cinematography and
it's incredible.
The script that mainly is very, very strong and those kind of parts. I think this is why people are talking about the film like it's more of a critical darling kind of like this is actually just a generally well made film that has horror elements to it, kind of thing, and that's why it's kind of that. Whereas I'd say Barbarian pushed more into horror,
definitely.
And it's one conversation that we had was that this is not as scary as Barbarian.
No, there were moments that were definitely unsettling, and there's gore throughout the film, but there were just moments that were a bit tense or a bit creepy. Or a bit like, this is odd. Or I'm kind of expecting one thing and, it doesn't quite happen. And it plays with tension quite well. And I think most of that comes from Zach Creggers. Like, his great use of sound. Or lack of sound at times. There's moments where there's a really good soundtrack. And then there's other times of just complete silence. And you're kind of hanging, waiting for something. But there were, Barbarian had moments where I was like, I've got like a 2-inch grip on an 8-inch log. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like about to shit myself. I'm that scared. And part of that is me going in blind, and part of it's maybe that was going for a lot more horror. But it's
the one area that some people might. I think that there could be people that might be disappointed with certain elements of this film.
Yeah.
And that horror aspect is one that could be. And I'm not saying that it's not. It's a tense film from the very beginning to the end.
Yeah.
It's tense. It's got tension throughout. It has scenes of graphic nature and gore and things like that you will enjoy. It's just not edge of your seat scary like Barbarian was.
No.
This is definitely him kind of almost flexing a bit more to be, I think, to show himself as a more all-rounder director maybe.
Yeah.
And not just necessarily wanting to get boxed into being the latest horror Jordan Peele, kind of thing, where it's very easy for directors to then get boxed into these zones kind of thing. And I think this film shows a little bit more range in certain ways, but it's still a love letter to a lot of horrors because this isn't for this, I read it, I saw it in like a little thing of a review kind of thing, but I definitely agree with it. Is someone called this, I don't know who it was, so I can't tell you, but they said this is the greatest Stephen King adaptation that isn't an adaptation.
Yeah.
Like, it literally, like, he would knock it out of the park. Like, there's some Salem's Lot kind of thing that I felt in some of the imagery and stuff that I was like, why the fuck? If only we could go back in time and have you do Salem's Lot.
Yeah, I know.
That would have been so much, like, you would have got it. Like, but I get what someone says when they say that, because it very much feels like that. If you're thinking more in terms of like a Stephen King style novel, where it's not necessarily constant Whore?
Oh, it's not, yeah, there's
Constant whores.
There's
not constant whores.
It's not constant, but there's a spattering of whores in your book.
Constant horror.
Yeah.
So it's like
and it's that suburbia as well.
Yeah,
that kind of like small town horror.
Kids, involved in stuff like that. I can see a lot of that, and I'd say it's more skewing to that than like full on like absolute like terrifying that's so like Barbarian, which is why it felt like a kind of comforting that the film was like that.
Maybe
it feels like you go very much from a mystery thriller like Prisoners, and then you suddenly switch over into a different kind of more into that. But it does exactly what something like a Stephen King book does, which is it very much establishes the world, and there's little spatterings, but then it goes into something that feels more like feels more like art, and it definitely does. In the third act of this, it definitely starts to lean way more into those horror things. From the second to maybe the third, we get a lot more, and we get more clarity on what's going on. But it's been very well spread out, so you feel like you know all the characters well enough that you can think about them or feel or understand decisions and stuff like that, whether you like the characters or not.
There's also a little bit of signposting as well, in a bit of like an Edgar Wright kind of way. I don't know if you picked up on it, but there were clues to kind of what's going on, kind of spattered throughout.
Yeah.
And it's only when I clocked up what was happening at a certain point, not like right at the end. Like I was just watching, I was like, oh, that's it. But there was something, and I was like, oh, I think I know what's going on now. And I really liked how that was done, because it made me think of some other stuff. And also, the one thing that I thought with, and this is something that the brothers who did Talk to Me and Bring Her Back could learn from, is it's got good titles as well. Barbarian and Weapons both work as really good metaphors for the films and the contents, whereas Talk to Me and Bring Her Back are just absolute. Bring Her Back, particularly just dog shit titles to give away the films. Whereas this one, I was kind of like, why is it called Weapons? Like why? And then there was a part of me that was right at the start being a dog shit.
There is one scene where that metaphorical part of it comes out in a very non-metaphorical way. In a weirdly nice way.
Not at all.
Yeah, nothing like that. Which is like was one bit when I was just like,
it was rather on the nose.
That was weirdly too. Didn't feel like it was needed at all. Like it was one of those. Yeah, and that involves Josh Brolin's character. If you're looking up, so he looks into the sky and sees something, and then that will be your hint towards like, that's what they were on about.
Yeah. But I kind of feel like it's quite well done in that way of like peppering things throughout.
I had the same where I could I think there was a certain point when I was definitely, and I was already thinking about that. It's just in the spoiler free way, all I can say is like there was a scene when she looks through the window. There was one scene there when I was like, that was when I was kind of like, right, we're definitely doing this then, I think. I think that's definitely what we're doing here. And then it started to unravel more, and it starts to make, like I mentioned before, like certain characters who maybe come across a little bit ridiculous start to actually become terrifying. And it's that kind of clever way that it kind of, he's unrolled it here, that something that seems so out of place suddenly makes sense. And suddenly starts to work. I would, talking more towards, that like, we can talk about the cast today, but they do a great, they do an amazing job, the cast that they've got. I think he's lucky with the cast he's got, because we almost had a completely different cast.
I heard Pedro Pascal has got to potentially be Josh Brolin's character.
I don't know all of the actors, but I'm not. Let's say he leveled up. Like his cast got a bit leveled up from what they were originally going to be. There was originally a less starry. Josh Brolin is fucking. It was going to be Pedro Pascal. I can see why Pedro Pascal and Josh Brolin. I mean, there's a similar look there in many ways, but I don't believe that Pedro Pascal, and he's a good actor, but he ain't bringing what Josh Brolin brings to anything.
He doesn't bring the intensity.
Josh Brolin brings us that. He is that. You know what I mean? Like
he's got that dog in him.
You know what I mean? Him, it's like again, like Josh Brolin. And then you said about Prisoners before, which was on my head a lot, to be fair. But, you know, when you had, like, Hugh Jackman, in my head I was literally like, oh yeah, it was Hugh Jackman. It wasn't Josh Brolin, because Josh Brolin could have done that. He could have done that same role easily.
Yeah, he could have.
But
Josh Brolin couldn't have done The Greatest Showman.
He couldn't.
That's true. Wolverine. Hugh Jackman Fox.
Wolverine.
Maybe. Hugh Jackman Fox.
Yeah, Hugh Jackman does Fox. He was great in that film as well. But yeah, there were, you know, I think, in fact, the only major one that was Austin Abrams, who plays the addict. The addict, yeah. I wasn't sure what to say it. I wasn't going to say it then.
You were going to be naughty.
No, well, I was going to say, I was just saying druggy. But, yeah, he's the only one I think that actually stayed on. So all the other cast, like Jennifer Garner wasn't in it, and, you know, yeah. Brian Tyree Henry is the major big name that I kind of know here, but he was going to be the principal of the school as well. But yeah,
Benedict Wong was good.
Benedict Wong, yeah, great.
Yeah, he was great. I heard that Pedro dropped out because of scheduling conflicts.
Fantastic Four. Yeah.
Was it with Fantastic Four?
It was Fantastic Four.
Because Jennifer Garner was in that as well.
Yeah, but she didn't have to do nearly as much for the film as
5 minutes.
Yeah, as much as Pedro probably had to do for the
film.
So
it was interesting.
Yeah, they had to drop out for those reasons. And the other one, the one I do love this thing. Do you hear the thing about Jordan Peele in this film?
Yes,
that he fired his managers because it didn't work out in terms of he was all the studios were bidding for this film. It was a huge package. It sold for something like 37 million, wow. I think, to I think is it Warner Brothers, I think, that took it in the end. But yeah, Warner Brothers, but and New Line Pictures. But literally, like, apparently he was chasing it so hard. He wanted this film, and when they didn't get it, but it also came down to the fact that Zach Creggers' manager was also his manager. Okay. So at the end of the day, basically what they said, people are pointing it on all different things, saying Zach Creggers and him got like beef or whatever, but actually what it seems to be was that Jordan Peele fired his managers because they chose to support Zach Cregger to get the better deal instead of supporting Jordan Peele to get the deal that he wanted. Okay. And therefore he saw that as a conflict of interest, so he fired his managers. Oh. But he fired them because he was like, this film's going to be fucking great and I want it, kind of thing. I want it on my... Because obviously, you know, Jordan Peele has made a good film, but he's also made a shit ton of now producing roles.
Yeah, he does a lot
of doing that. Yeah, so...
Is it Monkey Paw?
Yeah, I think Monkey Paw, and he's got him this year as well. It's coming out, so he's chasing a lot of those ones. I know he's he's actively fighting to try and get the rights to Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Interesting.
There's a whole bidding war with Texas Chainsaw Massacre going down, but yeah, so it's interesting. This has caused kind of ripples, and it looks like it's going to do well. It was made for 38 million, this film, and this weekend it is predicted to do nearly 30 million in the American box office for a new horror from
a relatively unknown guy.
You know, it's pretty big. I think, and again, I don't necessarily know whether, you know, the original cast, I think Josh Brolin and Julia Garner and things like that add a little bit of extra to this film, you know. I think especially Josh Brolin, when they see this and they see the thriller, I think that's adding a little bit to this that's maybe making people... And the marketing campaign, to be fair. I said about the thing, but it's been fucking like... Just the kids alone, the kids coming out of the house at 2:17 a.m. and that it's what sells it. You know, actually one of the things I would always say is, although it has an amazing part towards the end of the film of how this kind of all plays out, I expected them to go harder on the scariness of the children going missing, and I actually thought they didn't.
Yeah.
I felt like it is kind of one interesting thing. It's more
thriller.
The beginning of the film kind of glosses over a lot of that until, you know, for most of the film, so it's kind of interesting.
It is, yeah.
That I expected more of the children being creepy or the children doing things. It's not. It has a part, but it's not actually that huge a part of the film. When the marketing is a lot of making that bit, that opening scene, like those ideas of them leaving the house, really creepy. And actually, he doesn't play into it that hard.
No, but then I guess that for me kind of maybe adds another layer to it, because then you just run the risk of getting into creepy kids genre. Yeah, you know.
And at the beginning of this film, when you go to see it, it does kind of I'd say it glosses past a lot of the stuff you expect to be like the main focus of like the investigation and stuff like that. And it actually moves past to like almost like a month past it. Which I think was a good choice, because telling it from a lot of films tell it from the moment it happens and lets it play out through that. And that's where it gets bogged down in a lot of the same ideas and a lot of the same stuff. This has allowed it to be like, what is the community and what is it like with that? And again, he also makes it smaller because he does keep it down to a certain cast of people. He could have widened this to be the whole community or an uproar and everyone thinks, and we get feelings of that, but he doesn't delve into it. It is very much, no, let's stay on the characters' reactions to this. Let's stay on these people that I've just decided to choose, and we're going to stay with them, not really go into the wider community too much kind of thing.
I mean, I wonder what his Resident Evil film's got to be like. I kind of don't, because I'm a massive Resident Evil fan. I liked Welcome to Raccoon City, but I don't know. I don't have a clue. I don't
how
know
he makes it into something like
how he doesn't make it in.
There's a weird part of me that kind of, after seeing this film, goes a little bit like, I kind of wish he'd just focus on another original and not worry about Resident Evil. And I'm almost surprised, to be honest, after this film, if this gets the reception it's been, that other people aren't going to be a bit like, or if I wouldn't be surprised in the future to suddenly see that he's decided to not do it anymore.
Maybe
he suddenly goes, is doing Resident Evil going to make my stature as this like new Hollywood director who's doing these quite critically acclaimed films? Is that too big of a risk to go another Resident Evil film that people might be? And I think he'll make he'll make an awesome Resident Evil film. Like, he'll probably make it great. He'll go into it. I don't know. But whether people will rush out to see it, I don't know. I think that this is drawing in an audience of people that love like mysteries and thrillers and when kidnappings, and it's not just bringing in the horror crowd with this film. I think that's why it's going to make such a killing at the box office, because it's drawing in a different crowd. But Resident Evil's only going to draw in Resident Evil.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
but here's the thing. I'd rather he makes a good Resident Evil film and it doesn't maybe do so well than he makes a dog shit Resident Evil film that makes loads of money and then fucks himself. They're like, I don't want to hire that guy.
Yeah, he's not that kind of director anymore. He's ruined his, I think that's why someone like, say, his closest right now is to look at someone like Jordan Peele, because they've come in a kind of similar thing. They were background in comedy, they've come in to make horror films, and Jordan Peele has been quite careful to make, he's made 3 films, but they've all been pretty well received. They've all been generally
quite distinct as well.
And he's not rushing himself to make another one, because he's trying to keep that cred alive, I think, through the projects he's making. But it's very easy for a director to go from hit, fucking disaster, and then and then they're like,
especially nowadays, man.
Yeah, it's so easy for them to just go, nah, we're nah. Now you kind of fucked your cred there, mate.
Yeah.
So I really hope he. I don't know. I would like to see his interpretation, but I think I'd rather see something original more. Than that.
Yeah, I think that's stating the obvious, man.
Anyway, we're going away from our spoiler-free reactions. We're talking about stuff that we might come back to in the spoiler reactions. Maybe. But anyway, generally, I pointed out a few of, I think, things that people might find flaws. And I do think the only other area will be, just generally, that third act reveal will still be a kind of, it won't be a knockout of the park for everyone, because people will be expecting it to go either... I don't know. It's interesting the way, one thing I will say that is great about what he's done is that you can take something, and I'm really trying to say this without it being spoiler free. You can take an idea that may be implausible, maybe in some ways, and he can still ground it in a way that it feels that weirdly you're like, that kind of weirdly could work in some way, what I mean? Like, that could make sense. He doesn't make it seem like it's over the top. And even in Barbarian, he did the same thing of saying it should be kind of ridiculous in many ways, and he made it feel like actually
kind of grounded.
It's weirdly grounded, and I can weirdly understand some of this kind of thing. And just generally, there's a scene with Josh Brolin towards the end of this film which I thought was fucking hilarious. And there's a scene there's a scene with let's just say the bad person.
Yeah.
And that is near the very end of this film, which is fucking great.
Amazing.
It's amazing, and it's worth that waiting through the slow build of the earlier part of the film just to get towards that ending. And I'm surprised. I thought at first I was like, do I like this? Do I not like this third act reveal? Do I like the way it's going? But actually, I kind of felt straight away that I was like, well, in my head, I can't really think of many other ways this could have gone.
Yeah.
You know, except for, you know,
this.
a much, much darker way it could have gone. That's the only other way it could have gone.
Yeah.
Is a much, much darker, but not necessarily enjoyable way.
Yeah.
You know, that was the one other way to take it.
Yeah.
Then that's going completely away from horror and just into a normal kind. It's still horror, but it's a different kind of horror. It's more of a, you know, they'll make a Netflix documentary on the real life of
Epstein
this.
Island.
Yeah. I think anyway. As we're going on a bit long for our little spoiler-free reaction, I think you can tell from our reaction that we're pretty excited about this. You're already thinking of when to go and see it again.
Yeah,
so.
I think it's probably been my favourite horror of the year so far.
Yeah.
I think, you know, bold claim, but then there's been some great horror films this year.
Yeah, that's.
And
although we've been quite mixed on a fair amount of
we've
ones.
been mixed
the
on a
ones
few
we
of
were
them.
excited for, mainly actually so far, I think we've ended up being mixed on. And the one, I think, so I can't remember which ones we were like, really like, this is amazing. Dangerous Animals.
Dangerous Animals.
Oh, bring her back, Sarah. Bring her back.
Bring her back. Take her back.
Take her back.
It's a song by the
blended
Picture
them
Detectives.
together.
Yeah.
I thought you'd remember that. You just talked about shit style.
I just did. That's why I didn't remember, because it's so dog shit. And I mean, I guess that's it, you know. That's our spoiler-free thoughts. I think we're going to get stuck into it when it comes to, you know, our initial reaction and discussing it in depth. So if you want to make sure that you get that episode as soon as it's released, double check you hit that subscribe button, leave us a lovely review. Come and let us know what your thoughts were on Weapons. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at CMTH Podcast. Try and keep it, you know, spoiler free.
Definitely.
Yeah, and we will see you then. Take care. Goodbye.